Hi, everyone. My name is John Bristowe. I'm the community director for Octopus Deploy, and this is the Octopus 101, specifically the Octopus 101 for our folks in the APAC region or the Asia Pacific region. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. It's really great to have you here, and I'd like to thank you for your time and attention joining us here today. If you haven't attended one of these events before, that's fine. Octopus 101 is basically a monthly webinar series that we run to help you understand everything that you need to know about Octopus. If you haven't seen Octopus before, or maybe you have and you want to get a little bit deeper into what it is and how it works, this is the right place for you. This is the place to be for learning everything that we have around Octopus. So I can see we have some folks here attending today's webinar, which is great. Nice to see you. Let us know in the comments where you're joining from. If you're from Australia or somewhere else in the APAC region, it'd be awesome to hear. But yeah, just thought I'd get started here and kind of walk you through the paces of Octopus. Now, this is a live webinar, so feel free to submit your comments anytime. Happy to take any comments or feedback that you have or any questions you have. We'll be showing some live demos here, and we'll take our time, so don't worry. By the end of this, you'll have a really good understanding of Octopus, or at least that's the hope. So anyways, let's get going. You need to reach me via email. This is my email address. You can go ahead and send me an email anytime. Happy to get in touch with you and point you in the right direction if you have any questions. All right, so what we're going to look at in this webinar is a bunch of things. First, we're going to describe, how Octopus works, and probably more importantly, why you should use it. So every Octopus 101, I say, it's really important to understand the why. That is incredibly true. Oftentimes, we're, in this industry, we're throwing a lot of technology. And the sad part is that no one ever understands why should we use the technology. Understanding the why is incredibly important because it helps us understand or gives us perspective as to where we should apply it and what the benefits are. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the fundamentals around Octopus. So specifically talk about things like projects, development, deployment processes, releases. We'll talk about basically the building blocks of what a deployment process looks like. These are the sort of pieces of currency in the marketplace of Octopus, if you will. So these are the sort of fundamentals we'd like to talk about. And once you have those kind of locked in your head, you'll be in a good spot to understand kind of where to apply Octopus. Then we'll dive a little bit deeper and take a look at how we define a deployment process. So a deployment process is essentially a collection of steps that you'll run to deploy your software to some target. It's kind of like watching, or rather reading through a list of steps in a recipe for baking a cake or making some kind of dish in the kitchen. It's a similar sort of thing. You're following step-by-step procedures in an automated fashion for getting your software into the hand of your users. So we'll talk a little bit about how that works. And then finally, we'll wrap things up by talking about how you might trigger a deployment process using a CI process or server. So CI stands for continuous integration. It's typically denoted by what people canonically define as a build server. And this is where basically life starts in terms of a deployment pipeline. And so we start with a build or test, and then we go from there. It could be as simple as just starting with a package, but there you go. So we'll talk about how you can trigger deployment using that idea. All right. So with that, let's go ahead and get into the why. So Octopus, it's designed basically to make your life easier when it comes to software deployments. If you don't understand anything around Octopus or why its motivation is, understand that basically, deployment is a largely it's left as sort of an exercise to the reader, if you will, to a large extent. Deployments are often thought as often an afterthought in most people's minds. Most people are so fixated on builds that they tend to forget that they've got this package after a build that they have to get into the hands of users. How do I do that? And the reason why that's important is because, as you may know, if you've dealt with this, as your environment scales, things get more complicated. And so what we'll be talking about here is how to address those needs going forward. So on the left-hand side, we have our users, or we have our developers in this case. Developers are typically working on software, and they'll produce what's called a package as part of that, or they'll write on code. The package itself will be produced by a CI process, typically something like TeamCity, GitHub Actions, GitLab, what have you. There's plenty of solutions out there. And then from there, the package can then be provided to a solution like Octopus for doing the deployment. The deployment itself can range, in a wide variety of sophistication and can target a wide variety of deployment targets. But generally, this is the idea: is that we're trying to, in a sense, cover that last mile of your deployment pipeline, which typically involves these actors. So the why or some of the motivation behind this, obviously, without Octopus Deploy, things get really gnarly, things get really complicated. So you have a lot of DIY shadow CD or continuous delivery that happens. You have a lot of custom scripts that you often write, a lot of YAML, what we like to call YAML sprawl, and so things get really, really hard to manage. With Octopus Deploy, we would like to think that things are a lot more manageable. So you can basically use our taxonomy for describing things like applications in the form of projects. You have quantifiable environments that are predictable and usable. You have the ability to run operation tasks through a feature we have called runbooks, etc. These and other sorts of things you have available to you in Octopus. So you have a safe and sane way and repeatable and safe way of doing deployments. So the idea is that before using Octopus, your environment might look like something like this. So you might have a variety of tools utilizing Git that produce source files that generate, packages, etc. You have a wide variety of targets denoted by the gray boxes in the middle there, dev, test, prod, typical sort of environment setup. And then you have a wide variety of tools that you use for day 0, day 1, day 2 operations. So these are things that you have to use in combination with your deployments. So you have a lot of DIY shadow CD going on. You're trying to utilize these all-in-one solutions. They don't often do a great job of the CD part, the deployment part, and so things get kind of hard and they get really, really difficult, especially when you scale. And so the idea is with Octopus, you can now pass or delegate that responsibility over to Octopus Deploy, and there you'll have an ability to scale out your deployments, be able to execute or automated repetitive tasks, and of course, be able to get a really well thought out approach to doing deployments. In addition to that, everything is monitored, everything is auditable, so you can see who did what and when and why. In addition to that, we also have integration with a wide variety of tools as well, or solutions that folks may want to use. Some examples include ServiceNow, integration with Slack or Jira. These and other types of best-in-breed solutions are available for you to use in concert with Octopus Deploy. And of course, a wide variety of targets, whether those targets are hybrid, on premises, in the cloud, etc. We support all of them as part of this solution. All right. I mentioned some other things here. This is an example utilizing GitHub, but that's not really important right now. We'll just get into a demo. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So when you start by utilizing Octopus, you can visit our brand new website we have here. This is at octopus.com. You'll see a site that looks like this. We recently updated this site. So if you haven't seen it, there you go. There's our new site. All right. So this is Octopus Deploy. This is namely the dashboard you see in Octopus Deploy. So the dashboard is key for us. It's basically the place where we go to see the state of our deployments. So in the middle here, you can see we have a project here called Octopus. You can see our environments listed here at the top. So we have, in particular, development, staging, production, testing, etc. In fact, let me just go ahead and make this full screen here so you get a better sense of what this looks like. All right, so we have our environments here, development, staging, production, etc. We can have as many environments as we want. We can name them anything we want. Basically, they're a semantic view of where we're deploying our software to. If we take a look at one of our projects here, project is consistent of releases. Releases are essentially a snapshot. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But what probably the most important thing that people care about is your deployment process. So what does an actual deployment look like in terms of step-by-step procedures? So you can see I have a very simple one here that is utilizing a script step, what we call a script step. There's over 500 steps that we have available for you to use as part of defining a deployment process. In fact, let's take a look at how we might define a deployment process. So when I go into the process editor experience, what I'm doing here is I'm defining that list of steps that I may want to use as part of my deployment process. So in this well here, you can see I have that step that I had listed before, our hello world step, which is just a script step. But over here on the right-hand side, you can see I have a wide variety of what are called step templates. These are basically the things that I can use for defining a deployment process. So I have steps here that are featured, typically for things like if I want to deploy a Helm chart, if I'm utilizing Kubernetes, for example. I can also deploy a raw Kubernetes YAML instance if I wanted to a live instance. I can use a tool like Customize. This is great for parameterizing your configuration scripts for Kubernetes deployments. I can run a script step. I can run Azure scripts. I can utilize CLI, etc. There's all kinds of steps available in our featured category. In our middle here, you can see we have a variety of categories here that allow me to define other types of steps. So I can take any one of these steps here and add them to the list of steps that I have here. So I can, for example, I can send out a detailed notification via Slack if I wanted to. So by adding this, you can see it's now appended this step to the list of steps that I have defined as my deployment process. Now, when we take a look at a deployment process itself, every step itself will have a wide variety of settings. These are sort of the knobs and buttons that comprise the step itself. Don't worry too much about the details here. Basically, there's lots of attributes associated with every step. This is what you'll configure when defining the deployment process. But suffice it to say, there's a lot of steps available for you to use. So if we jump back to our step here, which is simply running a script can be defined in a variety of locations. So I can specify a script that's either defined inline, which is our default option. I can utilize a backend Git repository if I so wish. Or if I want, I can also define it as part of a package. So I can utilize a package, like a zip archive. I can just pull the script out of the zip archive and then utilize that as part of this deployment process. So by taking a look at this, I can see, okay, I've got a very simple hello world sort of outputting command line, hello world for using PowerShell. But you can certainly use sort of any type of script you want. Incidentally, this is the most popular step we have in Octopus Deploy. A lot of people like to, let me take the wheel and drive myself sort of thing. We have a wide variety of, obviously, script languages for you to use. So PowerShell, Bash, etc. if you want. And so once this is defined, you'll set this up and utilize this in concert with your deployment process, your deployment targets for doing deployments themselves. So let's go ahead and just delete this because I don't have Slack integrated here. That's fine. But what I can do next, after I've defined this, let's say I'm really happy with my deployment process, the way it's all set up. The next thing I can do is I can actually go about what's called creating a release. Now, a release is when I mention create a release, a lot of developers will often think like, okay, I'm actually doing the deployment, right? And in our taxonomy, it's actually creating what's called a snapshot. So we define a release as a versioned archive or snapshot of what we define for our deployment process, but it can also include things like variables that go into a particular release for an environment. It can include packages, etc. These and other things are really important for us to encapsulate into a release itself, because those things, we don't want those things changing wildly from environment to environment. If they do, we want them to be parameterized. And so there's this notion of what we have inside of Octopus, which are parameters, which we can certainly use. And it looks like my webcam is stopped working, so I will just go ahead and proceed without it. So there you go. It's live, folks. There you go. That's okay. So if my webcam decides to come back, we'll use it again. But for now, we'll just go without it. So hopefully you can still hear my voice. Let me know in the comments if you can't hear my voice. Well, actually, you wouldn't say that either. But if you can't understand me, let me know in the comments if you can hear my voice. Either way, it would be fine. So we're going to define a release here. A release is versioned, so we can use our versioning policy here. We can certainly use semantic versioning as well. We can also incorporate release notes as well if we wanted. So release notes are basically the series of markdown notes that we want to go into a release itself. Once we define a release itself will have, as part of that deployment process, have associated things like packages, any variables that I have defined, etc. I can utilize that as part of this, and then I can go and issue this as a deployment to any number of environments that I have available to me. So I can utilize this for any number of environments. So I can say deploy to and then select an environment. Notice here as well, I can also specify when I want releases to go out. I can either say now or later. I can schedule these. I can give them priority. This is an early feature that an early access feature we have for this, because you may have a lot of deployments going out at once, and so you may want to incorporate some priority for defining that. I can also, if I so choose, specify, look, all those steps that I have defined as my deployment process, I'm just going to check off certain ones that I don't want to run right now. So even after you define the release itself, you have some control over how these things actually go about and execute. There's other knobs and buttons and switches we can look at, but for now, we can just go ahead and issue the deployment itself. And this is what it will, the deployment step will look like when issuing the release. We're doing this to what's called a cloud region, which is basically a setup. It's like a worker and an agent that we have set up for you when utilizing Octopus Cloud. But If you had a set of agents set up for targeting deployment targets, this is where it would communicate with those targets and do the release itself. So you get a running log, which is important. Obviously, you want to see what's happening on the machine itself. You can get into a verbose mode, see the deployment itself occurring. And again, just remember, we're just running a script step here, so there's nothing magical happening here. We're just simply outputting a statement here, which you see here, to the log file. But what's really important is knowing that I can see, the history of the release. I can see what changes went into that release. I can see if I had any build information that went into this. This is typically the commits that went in against the repository that factored into creating this package, and then ultimately the release itself. So I can actually utilize that build information accordingly if I wanted to as part of all of this. And then I get a series of releases. And then once I have those releases available to me, I can then jump back into my dashboard here, and I can actually promote this release to a new environment, for example, like staging or production, etc. Obviously, I have these out of order here, but the idea is the same: is that I can utilize environment promotion here as part of the scenarios here for which I want to control these deployments. Now, earlier I mentioned that when utilizing this, I can certainly target a wide variety of targets. I can deploy to any number of targets that I wish. I set these up in advance. You can see there's the one that I just used, which is called a cloud region target. But if we take a look here at adding an agent, you can see we have a number of deployment targets that we support out of the box. So most recently, we've added support for Kubernetes in the form of an agent. We also can target the API as well if you wish, but our preferred method is to utilize an agent, which requires an installation. But that's the way that most of these things go anyway. We also have the ability to do deployments to Linux, Windows, Mac environments, for example. And we define it here as what's called a listening or polling tentacle. The idea is exactly the same. A tentacle is basically a name for an agent or something that's listening for requests that's coming from a Octopus server for doing deployments. So tentacle is just the name that we give it because obviously, it aligns well with the name Octopus. But you can see I can install these tentacles on Linux machines if I wanted, Mac machines. We also have integration with Azure, AWS. We can also set up what's called an offline package drop as well. This is something that allows us to do just basically set up a location for doing package deployments if we so wish. So these and other deployment targets I can set up and then utilize them in concert with environments, which allow me to basically denote where these actual deployment targets are set up. But coming back to the way in which the dashboard is presented here, basically the purpose of the dashboard is to present sort of that single pane of glass or that one-stop shop for seeing everything that's happening inside of your environment for Octopus itself. So this is the idea: is that we want to provide this sort of one-stop shop for folks to get this information quickly and easily. And look, hey, there you go. My webcam's now working. There you go. So yeah, we have this environment. We have this setup environment for us for doing these deployments. So awesome stuff. All right. That's a very, very high level sort of demo of Octopus 101. So let's just get back to the slides. We'll talk a little bit more about kind of what we're seeing here. And again, if you have any questions at all, let me know in the comments. I'll just quickly check the comments here. All loud and clear. Voice is fine. We can hear you. Great. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know. I appreciate it. Hi, Paul. Good to see you. So yeah, great to see that people can hear me. Obviously, my request before, if you could hear me, if you can't hear me, let me know. It doesn't make sense, but there you go. All right, let's move on. So in the example I showed you, super simple hello world type demo, and that's intentional. We just want to give you the basics of what's in Octopus itself. Obviously, as your deployment processes get more complicated, obviously they'll start to there will be a lot of nuance and process associated with it. So just to give you a sense of what this might look like in your environment, a typical example is, if we deal with customers all the time. I've seen deployment deployment processes with tens, if not hundreds of steps. So when we issue a deployment, a lot of orchestration is involved. And that's the idea, is we're defining a workflow as part of doing a deployment. So in the screen you saw previously, it might look something like this. So here you'll notice we have a visual representation of our deployment process. Note that we also have the ability to do conditional logic inside our deployment process, so it can have branching. So if I say, if the previous step failed, then I can execute or not execute a step afterwards. I can also have what are called child steps as well. We have integrated markdown-based notes. So this is really important, obviously, when you're working as teams and people want to get a sense of what a deployment process is and what the steps are. Really important, obviously, working in a collaborative environment because you may have more than one team utilizing your Octopus instance. We also have the ability to parallel step execute, so execution. So this is the idea is that I can just basically fork and execute in parallel a variety of steps. So I may want to do these because they are independent of each other. Sorry, I got a bit of a I've got a bit of a cold right now, so I'm dealing with a cough. I'm just going to mute temporarily here. All right, apologies for that. I also have a glass of water here that I'll quickly utilize. Cheers. It's that time of year. Everyone's getting sick. My kids are in school. As soon as they come back home, everyone gets sick in the house. So I apologize. In addition to that, we have what are called environment labels. So the idea here is that earlier you saw those environments I had listed at the top. So I had development, test, production, etc. I can actually denote which steps run in each one of those environments. So I can say, you know what, in the case here where I have, I'll zoom this in here so you can see it a little bit better. So in the case here where I have a DBA, so I'm doing deployment to a database, I may want to do what's called a manual intervention. That's a particular type of step we have available in Octopus, which basically says, go grab a human, get them to look at Octopus and verify that we're okay to proceed. So this is where a DBA will do a review of the migration of a database change. And this is only in the case where we're running against staging. So I don't know if you can see that, but here right here, if you look close enough, you squint closely, you'll see it says staging here. This is an environment label. And what this says is basically only run in the instance where this is being executed against staging itself. So there's a lot of particular and nuance that you can get involved with when doing your deployments, which is really nice. I find that actually quite nice for doing deployments. All right. So in addition to that, there's a lot of other capabilities as well, but that's essentially the lifeblood or the heart of Octopus itself is the deployment process, which is kind of why that's the first thing we show off in the demo. And I'll make sure I do target any other questions you have. Let me do this. I'm going to answer just a couple of questions that are coming in here. So Jeff asks, with Octopus runbooks, is there a way or a template that can be defined for patching endpoints at OS level or AKS, EKS? So the idea here is that I want to perform updates against a Kubernetes cluster or an OS through a runbook. And the answer is absolutely. I mean, a runbook is nothing. So we haven't gotten into runbooks yet, but we have this capability of Octopus called runbooks. Runbooks are basically like, if you have any operations you want to run or emergency tasks or things like that, you run those in the context of what's called a runbook. And so a runbook is basically, it's like a deployment process, except it's the idea is that you're not really deploying anything. You're just performing an execution of operations. And those operations are typically things like patch an update or issue a patch update to an OS or backup a database, etc. So you could certainly use a runbook in the concert with maintaining Kubernetes clusters or OS updates. So absolutely. All right. So just back to the slides here. I don't see any other questions. So another question, that comes up is like, why would I use this? Like, it seems like I could do this myself, right? I've got my scripts. What's wrong with my scripts? Why do I have to use something like Octopus? Well, you have to consider the fact that things like rollbacks aren't the easiest things to get right. And so this is something that we have built into the product automatically. You can just simply roll back versions, and it provides a sort of gives you a little bit of assurance when doing deployments. And this is part of the reason why folks really appreciate Octopus, is because it gives you a lot of confidence going forward into deploying your software. Is that if a mistake happens to get into our build, and we have to roll things back, that's fine. We're using Octopus, so it's easy to roll back and utilize that in a risk-free way. So the idea is that Octopus provides that sort of kind of like a tandem skydiver. You have a backup parachute available for you if you so wish. We just mentioned runbooks in terms of Jeff's question here. So, runbooks is basically a capability we have inside of Octopus. And the reason why we added this is because oftentimes the ops teams gets involved on the DevOps side of things. So you have dev and development and ops. And so ops is and op management is certainly something that is very, very important. And so runbooks are a capability that allows you to define similar types of things like deployment processes, except in the context here, it's for things like routine tasks or emergency tasks. These are things that you can execute. And the nice thing here is that you can predefine these things, set them up with all the necessary credentials, and then delegate those to junior members of the team to follow if there's a mitigation. Like, say they're on pager duty, for example, and a server goes down, and you predefined a runbook that allows you to um, restore service, etc. They don't need to call to request permissions, etc. They're all baked in and they're all secure, and so they can be coordinated as part of this. And so they just simply run a runbook, and they're back up and running as part of that. If you're utilizing Kubernetes, obviously we mentioned this a few times. Great support there for that. You can utilize YAML, you can utilize Helm charts for configuration. This is all presented in a very nice, user-friendly UI. You don't have to break out the ruler if you're doing YAML editing, for example. We do support YAML, so you can certainly use that if you're so inclined. And also, we have a feature here that I haven't shown off yet, but it's a feature called tenants. And multi-tenancy is a very core aspect of Octopus itself. It's almost as important as rollbacks. Customers who are more mature in their usage of Octopus tend to utilize multi-tenancy more and more, and they love it. It's like I'm never going back from multi-tenancy. I just absolutely love it. And so the idea is with multi-tenancy is that oftentimes you'll have applications that are different based on their locale or their geo that they're targeting. So I may run, the software for a retail store, and I want that retail store to have different versions based on the location of where that software is running. So I may have, let's say I'm in the US, I'm in Australia, by the way, but if I was in the US, I may want to have software for my West Coast customers who are using my software versus my East Coast customers. We can define those as what are called tenants. And based on that definition, we can then use those for defining different types of software, different versions of my application to those types of tenants. And so that's a core capability of Octopus and something that you don't see pretty much anywhere else. And that's one of many reasons why a lot of folks tend to favor Octopus. In addition to that, we also have, obviously, a lot of capabilities built in for governance, risk, and compliance. Everything is audited. I showed you an example of that when we did a deployment there. You can see the audit log, and you get a sense of who did what, when, and why. So this is all baked in. In addition to that, you can also, stream that audit log to third-party providers if you want. So if you're a fan of Sumo or Splunk or something like that, you can we stream out to that very easily. We also integrate with other systems as well. So integrations is very core to the way in which we do things at Octopus. We are not an island unto ourselves. We are part of a pipeline. And so integrations are very important to us. And so if you're looking at, managing deployments through systems like Jira Service Management or ServiceNow, that is something that we also support. So you can trigger a deployment via a service change request that comes from ServiceNow, for example, and then that will flow down to Octopus to do a deployment as part of your deployment pipeline. So you can certainly control how deployments are done via external systems, which is very, very important. All right, let's take a look at another demo. Demos are always fun. I've got another instance here just to show you a little bit of a variation of what Octopus might look like. Something that I think is important to some people as well. Of course, we support dark mode as well. So if you're a fan of dark mode, there you go. So this is an example where I have different types of projects here. These are grouped by project groups. But what I want to show here is kind of like what this might look like in concert with a CI process. So I've got my deployment process set up here, and things look good. I can do deployments via the dashboard, but the question often comes up, like, I'm doing automation. Why do I have to trigger everything manually through the website? You don't. The reality is that all this stuff will be automated and triggered via an external system. So even though I've shown you everything through point and click, the reality is that once you set this up, the automation will take over, and those deployments will be done via a third-party service, namely a CI process or server. So to give you an example here, we have our GitHub instance. This is a repo we have called Octo Pet Shop. If you're an old customer of Octopus, you would know this very well. But Octo Pet Shop is sort of kind of like a Hello World project that we have. Very simple example, but as part of this, we're utilizing GitHub Actions. GitHub Actions are like the sort of lifeblood of doing automations within GitHub. So GitHub Actions allow you to define in YAML a series of steps similar to how you might do inside of Octopus itself. But these are obviously build and test specific because that's where GitHub sits in the pipeline. It cares about code, and you can do deployments through GitHub. Don't get me wrong. I mean, you can certainly do that, but the reality is that you have to basically roll it yourself. There's not a lot of hand holding going on. You have to write your own scripts for doing a lot of this stuff. They have the notion of what are called they have the notion of environments, but it's not like ours. And forget multi-tenancy. A lot of the stuff you have to hand roll yourself. But if you're utilizing GitHub Actions, the good news there is we actually have action support built in for Octopus itself. So Octopus itself can integrate directly within your pipeline hosted in GitHub Actions through a series of actions we have already defined. So you can see some of them here. Here's an action called create release. That's that same thing I did earlier where I pressed the button to create the release. It's the same thing here, except it's encapsulated inside of a GitHub action. So the idea is that I can script these things out via YAML and GitHub Actions and trigger a release as part of this. Now, if you're curious as to where to find these things, if you go to github.com and you take a look at the marketplace, this is where everything lives in terms of extensibility with GitHub. So if you do a search here for Octopus, for example, you'll see all the actions we have built in for Octopus Deploy itself. So I can do things like I can install the CLI, I can integrate with GitHub Copilot, it's another topic entirely. I can also run a series of actions against my Octopus instances. So I can run a runbook, or I can create a release, or I can even upload the packages that are ultimately produced by my build. So when I do a build, I'm going to get a package, which is like the DLL, the exe, the O file, a whole bunch of other artifacts, etc. I may want to push those packages directly to Octopus, which I can. We have a built-in package repository. Or I can push them off to something like JFrog. We integrate with that as well. We call those feeds. If I'm a .NET developer, I may use something like NuGet. We integrate with NuGet as well. In fact, let's jump back here. I'll show you what that looks like. So inside here, you notice on the left-hand side here, we have all these settings here for a variety of things. Like I showed you deployment targets, talked a little bit about environments. There's other things as well that we can talk about. Let's talk about feeds for a second. So we talk about, where packages live. And one of the things that we may want to define is where are those packages coming from? So maybe I don't want to push them up to Octopus. I want to pull them down from some location. You can see here we have a wide variety of feeds supported out of the box here for Octopus itself. So I can pull them from Artifactory. I can utilize JFrog, I can utilize, NuGet if I wanted to for these sorts of packages, etc. These and other sorts of sources I can set up. Once I have these things defined, I can then utilize them in concert with the deployment process. So that's something that's very easy for me to use. Getting back here to GitHub, this is a series of actions we have built in out of the box. We have also integration points for other solutions as well. So if you're using TeamCity, we're the #1 integration for TeamCity. We integrate with GitLab and Jenkins and name a CI process, BuildKite. We've used all of them, and we integrate very, very well with all of them. So the reality is that you're going to utilize that as to start your deployment pipeline and then end up or round up utilizing Octopus for your deployments. Just to kind of round out the story here, all these actions that I've mentioned here do incorporate an API call. So there's an API that's assumed, an API key also that's assumed. If you want, you can use our app. So we have a GitHub app available for you to use that you can use in concert with Octopus. Once this is installed, that basically sets up basically a trusted connection between Octopus and GitHub. And so the app itself serves as an arbiter that communicates back to Octopus if you want to use that. So that's another way you can integrate with Octopus is via our app. I mentioned earlier our integration with GitHub Copilot. This is something that we have a video up on our YouTube channel you can take a look at, but basically allows you to communicate with Octopus via AI through GitHub Copilot, which is kind of cool. In fact, we were part of the launch there for the GitHub Copilot extension. So there you go. You can find those up on the marketplace itself. So just jumping back here, you'll define your YAML and utilize this in concert with Octopus, as I mentioned before. This is how you trigger or start a deployment. So this is a communication channel communicating back to Octopus from GitHub in that example. And if this was something else like TeamCity or Azure DevOps or Jenkins, the same process would apply, depending upon how obviously they do their things. Awesome. So once that thing is triggered, we can utilize it there and gives me a lot of extensibility. Cool. All right, so let's jump back to the slides. All right, so here's what we've learned. It was a bit quick, but that's fine. That's the idea, is just give you a little bit of exposure to what Octopus is and how it works. Most importantly, we talked a little bit about, what it is and why you should use it. As you start getting deeper and deeper into Octopus, the motivations for it will obviously come to fruition. We have a lot of guidance and documentation online of various scenarios. But the idea here with the Octopus 101 is it's a very light sort of approach of exposing you to Octopus, just to give you a sense of what Octopus is and how it works. We talked a lot about fundamentals, of course, talked about projects, talked about deployment processes. I showed you steps. We also showed you how to do a deployment process itself, how to create them from scratch, and then how to integrate with the CI process. Something I just want to make sure that's evident or clear. If I jump back into the process here, I mentioned earlier that we have over 500 steps. We have a lot of them built in, but if there is a step that's missing, we have a wide number of community-based steps that have been built in to Octopus itself. And this is a whole host of extensions that we have available as steps. So if you want to integrate with Argo or ASP.NET, or I'm just grabbing ones here, CyberArk or Google Chat, these and other types of steps have all been built in. And there's over 570, I think, now that are in the library. So there's a wide variety of steps in addition to the ones that we have built in out of the box for things like Azure, Google Cloud, etc. These are all built in, and so chances are you have a step that you can use. Now, if that being said, if you can't find something that we'll use, you can certainly take the wheel and drive it yourself with the run a script step. The run script is, as I said before, the most popular one, but it does give you access to that ability to execute these things as you see fit. Something else that I should probably mention is that we also have integration with insights. Insights are basically relaying DORA metrics integration. So DORA metrics are basically, the mean time to recovery, things like that. When you're doing deployments consistently and you want to track, how many deployments are we doing? How often are we recovering from failure, etc.? What's the time for that? We track all of that and put that into our insights capability, which you can also see as well. So we'll automatically aggregate that data, and then you can, use it as a badge of honor, I guess, if you're having a higher frequency of deployments, for example. So that's integrated as part of that as well. Something else that's bearing mention is we have RBAC built in, obviously. So we have a wide variety of roles that you can utilize for delegating security grants. We have auditing across the board. We have a wide variety of ways in which you can integrate as well. But again, those are more moderate to advanced topics. In Octopus 101, we're just trying to give you the basics here. So there you go. And so those are the things that we covered in the webinar, which is great. So there you go. 40 minutes, and you've got enough there to basically get your hands dirty with Octopus. You can sign up for a free trial today by visiting octopus.com. So if you go there, you'll see a site that looks like this. We have a big purple button here at the top. You click that, you'll be able to sign up for a Octopus trial. You can run it either on your own infrastructure if you want. You can install it yourself on premises, or, and this is what I would recommend, you can run it yourself in our cloud-based environments. So we'll set up a provision and environment for you to run, and you can test it out there. We also have a wide variety of docs and videos available for you to check out. Check out our website. It explains basically in detail all the things you need to know, which is awesome. My throat's about to give out. Apologies for that. It's that time of year. All right. Let's see if there are any questions left. I don't see any questions. That's awesome. Great. Well, either it's crystal clear or, you're off checking your phone. So there you go. Anyways, there you go. That's the Octopus 101 for the APAC region. Thank you for your time and attention. Really appreciate you joining me today. If you have any questions, let me know. Oh, we got an incoming question here. Can this be set up with on-premise servers without cloud? The answer is yes. Sorry, my voice is giving out. I'm getting really emotional thinking about Octopus. I love it so much. Yeah, you can run our execution. You can download it directly. So I'll show you what this looks like here. Jump back to my environment. So if you go over to here, there's our resources section. You click on downloads here, and then you can grab the bits and download it and install it yourself. You can certainly do that. I would recommend, however, it's probably best just to, if you're just trying it out for the first time, go to our homepage, try it up, and set up a cloud instance. That's the easiest way to get started. But you can certainly set this up yourself. Great question. All right. I don't see any other questions. All right, I'll say goodbye again. There you go. Anyways, thanks again joining. I really appreciate your time and attention. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you online. Happy deployments, everyone. Take care.